lately how very grateful I am for this ministry, for this congregation, for your mission, your passion, and your resilience. Have I told you lately that when I'm planning worship, I visualize you sitting in the pews, listening, singing, sharing silence, sharing fellowship? I see you, and sometimes I hear you. This is what I heard earlier this week as I was writing this sermon. Voice number one. So, Roberta, what are you doing preaching about sin again? You think we come to church to hear about how bad we are? Isn't that why we Unitarian Universalists exist, as an antidote to the hellfire and brimstone preaching of the Great Awakening? You have a very nice historical perspective, by the way. Very emotional and fear-based religious movement. They gave birth to liberal religion. Voice number two. Well, yeah, but haven't you ever been accused of belonging to a Pollyanna-like cult that thinks everything is good and everybody is wonderful? Do you ever just look around and see all the evil in the world? If you believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person, how do you explain Hitler? That one's always the conversation starter. So I have to tell you that if I spent all my worship preparation time listening to your voices, I'd never get the sermon written. Yes, I know sin is a hard word for some of you to hear. And to those of you, I say, not that sin. And I know that sometimes our faith in humanity is hard to hold on to while reading the daily news. And to you, I say, inherent worth, not necessarily inherent behavioral worth. Over the past year, I have been engaged at the request of the board in a study of what makes congregations grow and what keeps congregations from growing. This 3-sermon series is, in effect, my report on that study. I've learned a great deal about the place of institutional religion in American culture here in the 21st century, and I've learned a great deal about the particular place of liberal religion. And to be honest, there is no way to get at what is holding us back, what is preventing us from becoming what the sages over the centuries always thought would be the quintessential American religion, without using some pretty strong language, without using words like sin. Fred Muir, the author of our reading this morning, and thank you, Jim, that was a complex reading, and the book on which this sermon series is based, identified 3 sins, corporate misunderstandings, if you will, that make it hard for us to grow and thrive. The first, as Jim said, we discussed last night, is individualism. Now, Fred is not advocating that we turn our backs on our first principle that affirms the inherent worth and dignity of every person. He is simply urging us to be acutely aware of the shadow side of honoring individuality, and that is idolizing the individual at the expense of the greater good. Taking such pride in being creedless that we forget that we are a covenanted community, that we owe each other something, that we need to voluntarily sacrifice something for the good of the whole. That was, by the way, America's first statement of faith as well, which is why I think some of the early founders of this country thought that Unitarianism would become the quintessential American religion. You know, before our fear of so-called godless communism drove us to put "in God we trust" on our money, we had a different phrase there all by itself, didn't we? E pluribus unum, out of many, one. So the antidote for individualism is not blind conformity. It is, according to Fred, generosity of spirit. It takes courage to practice spiritual generosity. You have to take a leap of faith to believe that there will always be enough, always enough to share. To live from an assumption of plenty rather than scarcity. Most particularly in today's political climate in which fearmongers are urging us to hoard, to scapegoat, to clutch what we have to our hearts. A spirit of generosity gently nudges us to unclench our fists, move past our anxieties, and open up to still unseen possibilities. Fred writes, when we are around those whose spirit is generous, who give of their time, presence, and resources, we leave them feeling refreshed and whole and ready to engage another day. Maybe we hope to spend more time with them or even emulate their actions and words. If people come to church and have that kind of experience, they'll come back. That's the kind of experience that makes people say, I want what they have. It's the foundation for healthy growth. And so let us with courage then move on to confront the next sin in the Trinity, exceptionalism. Again, quoting Fred Muir, here is how the Unitarian Universalist version of exceptionalism sounds to many. Unitarian Universalism is a faith shaped by perceptions, ideas, intuitions, and ambitions which posits, among other things, that our way of religion is uniquely virtuous. Now, you know this is true. We have all been guilty of being prideful, even boastful about our incredibly enlightened approach to religion. Fred goes on to say, also uniquely powerful. And you know this is true too. We brag about the outsized effect we have had historically in spite of our small numbers. And then, to prove it, we point to accomplishments of the late 19th century. And he says, we assume ourselves to be uniquely destined to accomplish great things. To prove that, we point out that Thomas Jefferson once said that he believed that within a generation, every young man in America would be a Unitarian. One of many things that Thomas Jefferson turned out to be wrong about. And Fred goes on, thus uniquely authorized to act in ways which we would object to if done by other ways of faith. We are so proud of not imposing a creed on ourselves, but there are some orthodoxies among us that new people violate at their peril. For example, I once saw a new mother reduced to tears after she made the terrible mistake of bringing a donation to a potluck dinner that had been purchased at Walmart. She was scolded and told in no uncertain terms that we do not shop at Walmart. The person who scolded her had no idea that this single mother could not afford to shop at the upscale grocery store being touted as the ethical alternative to a Walmart. This didn't happen here, but it could. Embedded in our sense of exceptionalism are several assumptions. One is that we are smarter than everybody else and better educated. Come on. You know that's true. That many of us who are atheists or agnostic or humanists secretly believe that our faith is more evolved than the faith of those who cling to their superstitious belief in God. Am I pushing anyone's buttons? If not, give me another minute. I'm just going to power on. Go for it. All right. We too often make the mistake of assuming that everyone in our congregations is college educated, for example. That because we advocate the use of reason in religion, others must have a degree or two in order to follow our path. It is important to remember that all people, no matter their level of education, are capable of thinking critically about their own life experiences. Liberating education consists in acts of cognition, not transfers of information. That's from the educational philosopher Paulo Freire from his book Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Now, I love his words and the root idea in his work. It has always felt to me like the corrective to our UU tendency to over-intellectualize. Now look, I know this room is pretty full of PhDs, this congregation more than some. I don't have one. I started to work on a D.Min degree. I took one course. And I quickly realized that what I needed at that point in my career and what my congregations needed was not more information, but more depth and love and passion. My humble offerings to you, each of you, no matter your educational or developmental level, is that I can help you to reflect on your lives in thoughtful ways that will be transformative. And that's what theology is for Unitarian Universalism, is it not? Reflection on lived experience. That's the phrase Dick Gilbert, who was the author of our prayer this morning and also the author of the very popular adult education curriculum, Building Your Own Theology. That's how he describes our way of building religion. Theology for Unitarian Universalists is nothing but reflection on lived experience. The kind of reflecting we do in our small groups, whether soul matters or otherwise, in our team meetings and in worship. So there's the sin of exceptionalism. It is the assumptions we make, sometimes, maybe often unconsciously, about intelligence, education level, class, experience, and resources. Again, quoting Fred Muir, we must stay conscious of how we explain, defend, or share our faith, lest we come across as elitist, insulting, degrading, isolating, or even humiliating to others. And all those things have happened. What then is the antidote to this sin? Well, it is the genuine embrace of pluralism. We must cultivate a firm belief that our way is one way, a good way for those who choose it, but it is not the only way of faith. The promise of pluralism moves us past simply the celebration of diversity in words. As Muir points out, diversity simply means differences. Everybody in our nation now lives with diversity, whether they like it or not. But for diversity to deepen into the spiritual practice of pluralism takes intention and courage. Epul Patel writes, pluralism is an achievement characterized by three elements: respect for different identities, positive relationships between diverse communities, and a commitment to the common good. There we are again. Because now I feel like I've come full circle back to the common good. And I have to say, it takes courage to achieve pluralism the way Epul Patel defines it. The courage to respect rather than fear difference. Something we believe and fervently hope we have. But do we always? The courage to lean into the differences and engage with those we might otherwise fear. To engage in true conversation, a give and take from which we all might learn. And the courage then, once again, to commit to the common good, to be willing to sacrifice for it. Now our theme for the month of October has been courage, and it snuck into this sermon even though I wasn't expecting it to. You know what the theme for November is? Who's read their newsletter? Abundance. Abundance. The question is, what does it mean to be a people of abundance? And that also seems to have snuck into this sermon, even though it's still October. October, by the way, was a very long month. I know. The corrective for excessive individualism is generosity, right? The spiritual practice of living into and out of faith in an abundance of resources. The corrective for exceptionalism is pluralism, the practice of living into and out of an abundance of ways of being in the world. Now, we have begun in earnest to renew our membership processes. New ideas, new teams, new volunteers. The greeters and ushers just attended a training on their evolving role this morning. Later in the year, I'm going to be offering an evening of leadership training for everybody in the congregation on practicing the art of radical hospitality. And we're even going to serve food because that's part of the art of practicing hospitality. We want everyone who comes through our doors on Sunday morning to feel embraced and welcome and not othered. We want everyone who finds the courage to come to a meeting or an event to be embraced and welcomed and not isolated. But these organizational fixes will only move us a little bit closer to our goal of growing into a thriving and diverse UU congregation. The real key to growth lies with those of you who do not have a job on the membership and engagement committee. Those of you who, when you come to church on Sunday, deliberately seek out the person you don't know rather than only talking to your friends. Those of you who put on your name tag first thing, even though it is really hard to remember. Those of you who, when beginning a conversation, do so with an open-minded question that is free of assumptions about who might choose to come to a UU congregation. Those of you who can, when asked, articulate something positive about your UU faith rather than comparing it unfavorably to other religions. You know, we've all done that. So let's atone for the corporate sin of exceptionalism by being both individually and corporately extraordinary instead. Extraordinarily intentional, extraordinarily hospitable, extraordinarily bold in our openness to the whole range of human experience. As we move from October to November, from courage to abundance, let's just be extraordinary. And in case you need some food for the journey, I want to close by offering you one of my favorite poems, The Fountain by Denise Beavertoft. Don't say there is no water to solace the dryness at our hearts. I have seen the fountain springing out of the rock wall and you drinking there. And I too, before your eyes, found footholds and climbed to drink the cool water. The woman of that place, shading her eyes, frowned as she watched, but not because she grudged the water, only because she was waiting to see we drank our fill and were refreshed. Don't say there is no water. The fountain is there among its scalloped gray and green stones. It is still there and always there with its quiet song and strange power to spring in us up and out through the rock.